We control our career path. I'm the best example for that. I don't think I really ever had anything handed to me. I just had really ambitious goals, and anywhere I went, I pretty much decided what I want my role to look like or what I want the next step to look like. And I built it.
And the kids are in the candy store and they just start like, you can make the sunrise. They just start grabbing all the candy. I'm like, think about your job like that, right? Like a kid in a candy store who gets paid to learn and grow and get ready for their best next move every day. If we look at it like that, it like everything changes. Right, Maya, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna.
Yeah, could you tell us who you are in a few sentences? What do you work on? What are you doing right now with your time and your talents?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Maya Grossman. I'm the VP of Marketing at a company called Jumpstart, which is a diversity recruiting platform. But I've been in marketing for almost 15 years, did pretty much everything you can imagine within the marketing realm before getting to the executive roles. And I am also very passionate about career development. So in the past year, I spent a lot of time sharing career advice on LinkedIn, writing a book about it, and just really helping young professionals figure out how to navigate the workspace.
Yeah, I think that's how I found you, Maya, is just, I don't know, found you on LinkedIn one day and started following your content. And it really spoke to me because after being in-house 19 years, I look back on like what made me successful. And when people say like, how did you get that project? How did you get that job? And really what was the most invaluable experience to me was when I was an intrapreneur, where I said like, I'm going to own my time and my talents, and I choose to work here. So I'm going to apply those time and talents how I want to.
We control our career path. I'm the best example for that. I don't think I really ever had anything handed to me. I just had really ambitious goals, and anywhere I went, I pretty much decided what I want my role to look like or what I want the next step to look like. And I built it.
When you say you built it, give us a few examples of how you've been able to do that.
Yeah, of course. The easiest experience, and it's actually very early in my career. So I actually didn't start in marketing. I spent the first 7 years of my life as a travel agent. And I got that job because I really had to put myself through college. It was a great company, great salary. I was very comfortable, but I wasn't excited about the work that I was doing. It was just really nice. And at the time I was doing my bachelor's, I fell in love with marketing. I started thinking, okay, maybe I can get a job doing that because it's really interesting and exciting. And I was able to get my first marketing job. That's a different story. We can talk about it. And I was working for social media and PR agency. And I was one of 5 account executives, super small company. We were working from the founder's home, just kind of building it from the ground up. Everyone were really excited, but we were growing so fast that things were falling apart. We didn't have processes. Every account manager was doing things differently. It was all over the place. And I could see it. And I just felt really bad. I love the company. I love the people. I knew we were doing a good job, but something just wasn't working and it bugged me. So I thought about it. And then I had this eureka moment of like, I know what we need to do. If we bring in a manager, someone who can really rally the troops, put together some processes in place and really have a structure for what we're doing, I'm sure we'll be fine. So I wrote it down, just like 1 page, 5 bullet points, went to the CEO and said, hey, I think we have a problem. Don't worry, I have a solution. Here's my plan to save the company. And I will never forget it. He looked at me with this huge smile on his face and he said, you know what, you're absolutely right. Starting tomorrow, you're the team leader, so go fix it. So essentially, I built a role for myself because I cared enough. I saw a problem and I wanted to fix it.
Yes. And look, I don't want to discredit you or me because I got a lot of roles in the same way by saying it's that easy. It's not that easy, but it is that simple, right? That you are able to identify problems. And here's what I know to be true. I've worked with hundreds of companies. Everybody has something to say when I come in. They're like, let me tell you what needs to get better here. Let me tell you what I missed about our culture, right? Let me tell you where we need to go. You can tell me all day, but why don't you talk to your leaders? Why don't you come up with a proposal? Why don't you see if the solution, or you could be part of the solution, right? That's the key. That's the key to getting that project, to getting ahead, to getting noticed, is speaking up and creating that solution. So I saw a recent post by you about being new in an organization and that you shouldn't sit back and listen. I think the advice was like, everybody says the first 90 days, you should just listen and observe. And you were saying like, no, don't do that. And I wholeheartedly agree. So how do you balance coming in with new, fresh ideas and honoring what's happened before you came?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to listen. Listening is important at every stage.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, when you're new to a company, you have a really unique, unbiased view of everything that's happening. When you're part of a group for a really long time, there's this phenomenon called groupthink, where everyone just assumes the same things. They're part of the same processes. It's very hard to kind of see outside of that box. Someone new, at least for the first 90 days, have that opportunity to really notice things that might have been there forever, but the rest of the team can't see. And I think you just can't miss that. That's an opportunity. Forget about yourself and giving yourself credit. That's an opportunity to do something really good for your company and for your team, and really set yourself up for success and be that person who solves problems, who cares about other people. So yes, you definitely need to start with listening. If you jump into an organization, you're not going to change it day number one. But having said that, if you just listen, you probably won't get everything that you need. You need to proactively listen. You need to ask questions. If you hear something in one place, go talk to 5 more people and see if it's a problem across the board. Don't just dismiss it. Just be a little bit more active in your listening, in asking questions, and don't be afraid to come up with ideas and solutions. And here's a tip to anyone who's like scared to maybe step on toes, or make someone feel like you're trying to step over. Position your advice as questions.
Yes.
So for example, if you come in and you see people are doing something manually that can be solved with software in a minute, and you can save 20 hours a week and a lot of headache. So maybe you can just kind of ask, hey, have you ever considered moving this process into a software? I've actually seen in my previous company that it worked really well. And if you hear, yes, we tried it, it didn't work, you can probe a little bit, try and understand why. Was it budget? Was it the type of software? And it will give you an indication if this is a road you want to pursue, or if maybe this is something that's already been discussed, you're probably not going to change it. You can find something else to fix.
One, you're honoring that you do have value. You got hired to this position, to this company for a reason, right? So don't just think it's this nice little job description that is full of just a few bullets and legalese, right? It's more than that. So you're honoring yourself, but you're also honoring the people that came before you, right? By asking, by getting curious and saying, what have you done about this before? I'd like to know. I'd like to understand. When we skip that step, and I admit wholeheartedly that there's probably been times in my career where I've skipped that step, not just in the 90 days, but maybe later on, right? When I think I've acclimated enough, didn't go ask enough people, didn't get enough data, went in with my idea and my solutions, right? Thinking that I had the whole problem solved. And I was short-sighted, right? I missed that piece. So either I missed it and didn't have a complete enough solution, or I didn't bring people along with me to influence the outcome, right? So then they're going to work against the change. So I think you do both when you do that.
Yeah, that's a really important part. And there's actually a whole chapter in my book, in Invaluable, about how to do that. It's called the influence formula. And it's all about how can you stop thinking about you and start thinking about everyone else and what they get out of working with you, giving you a budget, approving a project, and how can you position it so that they actually win. And when you come with that mindset, more often than not, you'll be able to get all the support that you need.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, so Invaluable. Let's talk about that really quick. So you wrote this book. What really compelled you? Is it just that desire to speak to those who would and should maybe own their career more?
A little bit. I've been writing ever since I can remember. Writing is my way of expressing myself. Some people sing, they dance, I write. For the majority of my life, I just wrote, for myself. Everything was sitting in a drawer. And then I started using it in my career as a marketer and really developed that skill. And I always knew one day I am going to make an impact. I need to somehow, even in a small way, change the world. But I didn't know how. And about 2 years ago, I was working on a project, and a few different people came up to me and asked me the exact same questions about their career. They were feeling stuck, they didn't know what to do, and they needed advice. And I was giving them the same advice. And at some point, I thought, hey, maybe I should write a blog post and share it so that more people would know. And from blog post, it kind of turned into, well, I actually have more to say, and that ended up turning into a book. And while I was writing it, a lot of things actually changed, not the advice, but the way that I tell the story, because I got to know so many young professionals, and I really got to understand what they're struggling with, what the landscape of recruiting looks like right now, what the workspace looks like right now for someone who's not, at the executive level, and hopefully was able to create something that is useful to people who are either starting their career, or even if you've been there for a while and you feel kind of stuck, then maybe that's the encouragement that you need and the tools that you need to be able to get unstuck and go back to owning your career and getting almost everything that you want.
Oh, totally agree. And I love that you expanded that just outside of the young professionals, because I coach a lot of people at that level of like they're right about to take the chief role, right? Chief something, and they're nervous. And look, I've been there, right? I got offered the chief human capital officer job, stewed over it for 2 years while I was being groomed, was very honest that I wasn't sure if that was the direction I was going to go. So I didn't like pull a fast one on them, but I was just like the self-inflicted torture of like, what should I be doing? So they find themselves in that too. And I think we need to look at a lot of this advice, because when we've been in an organization, even for 3 years, doesn't have to be 30 years, we sort of put our blinders over time, sort of coming closer and closer. We lose that perspective. We don't have a lot of outside data to make data-driven decisions. And so I feel like a lot of the advice that you're talking about is good for that level too. Refresh your thinking about your influence strategy, because I think a lot of people have a desire for more, right? So similar to your book, I got asked the questions, or at least in my coaching of people at all ranges of the workforce, I was hearing two things, right? These questions that they were asking of themselves were, is this really what I should be doing with my time and talents? And if so, what should I do next? Right? If so, or if not, what should I do next? So that's what I gave my TEDx talk on, because I was like, if I have a platform, I want to speak to the people who need that reassurance that, look, like you can double down where you're at. You don't have to go be an entrepreneur. You can be an intrapreneur. You don't even have to move companies. You can refresh your own thinking, dust off these habits that maybe you formed over the years. And I always give the visual of like, remember Willy Wonka?
Yeah.
The movie, and the kids are in the candy store and they just start like, you can make the sunrise. They just start grabbing all the candy. I'm like, think about your job like that, right? Like a kid in a candy store who gets paid to learn and grow and get ready for their best next move every day. If we look at it like that, it like everything changes.
Yeah, this is so funny. This is one of the things that people, I think, overlook the most. Your current job is the best way to get ready for the next job, whether it's with the same company or somewhere else. And all it takes is for you to identify that next step, develop a list of skills and experiences that you need to acquire to get there, and then start asking for it.
Yes.
So much of my ability to grow came from me just going to my manager and saying, hey, I think I need to work on my strategy skills. I would love to shadow you when you work on strategy, right? I even said, I'm going to design your PowerPoint presentation for you. I just want access to the information. And by doing that, the following month, it wasn't just the design. It was, can you also, move the numbers around and let them make sense? And then it was, oh, let me give you more context. You can build the whole presentation. And within 1 quarter, I was responsible for strategy, and I've never done that before. So it's just about figuring out what is the type of opportunity you need and then creating it.
Yes, created, right? And look, it might not work. I can promise you that not every idea that I pitched, right, turned into a new
Of
role or a new
course.
project, right? But it's sort of a numbers game where I didn't hold back. You know, it's like these are the stories I'm hearing. Here's how I think I could add value. If it didn't go anywhere, then that's okay, right? Maybe I planted seeds for the future, for somebody else, or for that leader to think differently. So Maya, when you're talking, I'm thinking about people who say like, I don't get enough training, right? My company doesn't spend enough money or invest enough on my training. I'm of the school of thought that training is great, right? But often we don't really come back to apply it. So we sort of look at that as like the formal education. I'd rather have, and I think the most impactful entrepreneurs do their best when they have first exposure and then experience. So the example that you shared was you gaining first exposure, right? Asking, could I at least see, right? And I've had people say like, oh, this has some confidential information. Well, could I see a version that doesn't have the confidential information in it, right? If that's not for my specific role or my pay grade, I understand, but could I have a version without it? So once you gain that exposure, you start to have information and data that you can ask for the experience that you want, right? Even if it isn't with that leader, and even if your own manager gets a little jiggy when you start to like ask for like up leveling skills, you can try different people, right? Mentors, sponsors. Did you use mentors or sponsors internally when you've navigated your career?
Yeah, I probably did. I had a lot of great managers. So for me, a lot of my focus was on building those relationships so
Okay.
that when I do ask for opportunities, they're happy to help. And a great tip that I can share is this. While you do have to own your own, OKRs and your goals, they have to level up to whatever it is your manager is trying to achieve. You need to know what they're after, what's going to make them look good in front of the leadership team. And then anything that you suggest should help them get there faster or make their lives easier. Because I don't know, as a hiring manager, I will never say no if one of my team members wants to help me do my job better. And if they learn in the process, that's a huge bonus.
Yeah.
So just it's really all about how you position your asks instead of coming from a place of entitlement, me, I want a
Yes.
course, I want a class, I need you to spend money on me. If you do it in a different way that demonstrates how you're actually going to contribute to the overall business goals, I find rarely that people say no. And
Yeah.
what you said about resources, look, I worked for the bigger companies, worked for Microsoft and Google. Resources are endless. You know
Mhm.
what? That's a problem. You don't even know where to start. There's
Yep.
so much
Yep.
that it's overwhelming, and most people just take a step back.
Yeah.
And when I worked for the smaller companies, we barely had anything. But if I really needed something and asked for it specifically, then hey, a company actually paid for me to take classes so that I can be better at my job. And we found a way to make it work, right? It was really expensive. So I said, for every month of class that you're paying for, I'll give you an extra month of commitment. I'm going to stay here for at
Nice.
least a year after I complete my education, but it was worth it. And if I haven't came up with the idea of like, hey, I need to go learn something new, they wouldn't have suggested it. Not because they don't like me, not
Yeah.
they just didn't have a program for education because
Mhm.
there were 20 people at that company.
Right, right. And that's where the experience and exposure becomes so much more prevalent, right? Because there isn't a lot of that education. So go for that and ask for it. So let's imagine though, Maya, that the truth happens and that there are some really sucky leaders out there, right? Who do get intimidated when people like you or I come in and start asking questions and getting curious and even wanting to help them. You would think like, oh, wouldn't they want to delegate? What can you do? What can an individual do if they do have that leader who's just like, nope, not having it? What's some advice that you have for them?
Yeah. Um, there are a couple of different things you can do, right? So before you kind of give up on that specific leader, you may want to consider where they're coming from, right? And a lot of the time, it comes from insecurity
Yeah.
because not every manager understands that their team's work actually reflects on them. And if their team does a great job, then it's going to look like they're doing a great job. They think, oh, this person is going to like overperform and I'm going to look bad, but they don't really realize that whatever their team does reflects on them. So I try to make sure that they know that. And I also try to demonstrate how it affects them. And the way that I would do it is to, even with my own work, I will try and get them involved, make them a strong stakeholder. I will keep them up to date throughout the process. And at the end, or even at every step of the way, I will give them a shout out. I will send, emails to the entire team and say that I couldn't have done this without my manager, or that we are contributing to the overall company goals. I will just make sure that they get something out of working with me and giving me a little bit of freedom. And I will start with my work and then slowly ask for smaller and smaller tasks that maybe wouldn't be as intimidating to them until we get to a place that they can trust me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't always work. I do think it's worth the investment. I've seen people go from one end to the other, from like, no, I don't want to work with you, to I'm going to give you everything. But it does take, a couple of good months of building that trust and that relationship. You can just look for other stakeholders, right? Yes, your manager is definitely the best place to start, but there are other teams that you can contribute to. There are other places you can gain that experience. I would, however, say just make sure that you still do your day job. The minute the extra work takes over, you're going to have a problem with your direct manager, and it's not worth it.
Yes, right. That's the only time I agree with the phrase stay in your lane, right? Is when I say, what I love about stay in the lane is it reminds us that you do have a job you were hired for. So if you're not going to do that, they're not going to let you do all this other stuff, right? You can get really smart and fit a really big job into shorter amount of time. Good for you. Then be smart about how you're going to use that extra time. But if you don't meet your objectives, your OKRs like that they're going to take all that away from you, right? And then it's going to feel like I'm not doing meaningful work. Well, you could do meaningful work if you did your job and.
Yeah, and I think some people don't realize the amount of work that goes into that. For a really long time, I spent more than my daily 9 to 5 because I needed those extra 2 hours every day. It was worth it to me because I had a plan. I knew where I wanted to go. And it's worth it because at the end, the result of that extra work is so meaningful that your manager will end up coming to you and say, you know what, those other stuff, let's outsource them, or let's bring someone more junior because I need you to focus on the important things because I know you can do them. It just takes time.
Yeah, agreed. I think I like to use the phrase long game because people think it's got to be the immediate response, but long game doesn't always. And I love that you share that example. It could take a couple months. We're really not talking about years, right? I use a tool that I have used internally with teams before called an influence strategy, very similar to yours, where it's like, put your key stakeholders, put your leader on there. What do you know about them? How do they, what makes them tick? What are they working on? So that you can get close to them and then review that weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever you need to do to make sure that you're spending your time in that relationship. And people hear that and think, oh, that's manipulative. I don't think it's manipulative. I think it's strategic, right? It's saying this is a person of influence who has a lot of say over my career. Why wouldn't I want to invest in them? And don't wait for your leader to come to you with that, right? You can own the relationship. And even though Gary Vaynerchuk, and I love Gary V, he says like leaders serve your people. Yes, I'm a people leader like that, but there's lots that aren't, right? So until you get that with your leader, you serve them, right? You figure out their goals and get closer to that. That's great advice, Maya.
Yeah, no, 100%. I remember, I take it to the extreme. I remember my first 30 and even 90 days at Microsoft. The day I joined, my manager left for a 3-week vacation. He was very kind to come into the office with his luggage just to say goodbye before he goes to the airport. But I had 3 weeks to like figure out what I want to do. And, some people may slack around or just get to know everyone. But I had, to be productive. So I spent time learning and I put together a plan and I set up a 30-day check-in with my boss. I didn't wait for him to do it. So the week he got back, I was like, here's everything I learned. Here's my plan for the next 30 days. I need to know, I want your feedback. And if I would have waited for him, that could have taken another month or two, and then everything would be delayed. And I just wanted to get, work done. That's what I was hired to do. And then I had a 60-day check-in and a 90-day check-in that was very specific. Like, what am I doing well? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? And yes, for some companies, it's going to be structured. Your leaders would know what to do, but that's not always the case. If I had to put numbers on it, I would say 80% of my career, I had to do that for my managers. they didn't do it for me. So really no reason to wait.
Yes.
And as a hiring manager, I love that initiative.
Yeah.
We have so much on our plate, and it's not that we don't care about our direct reports, but it's sometimes hard to prioritize a process versus a business goal. So if you have a team member who does that for you, bless their heart. I would want to work with them every single day.
Yes. And you'll get noticed in other ways too, not just with the leader. So that's not short-sighted. Let's talk about the ecosystem, because when I talk to groups, I always say if it's a mixed group and it's individual contributors and people leaders, I talk about how the individuals should own their time and their talents better, but the ecosystem also has to provide the environment where these people can thrive, because a lot of us have worked in companies or still work in companies that have antiquated systems, right?
Yeah.
That are still relying on processes built for Ford to make trucks and cars, however many years ago. So things have changed, but not all of our behaviors and structures have. So what do you think the ecosystem needs to have in order to allow either an individual, or I would love to see a culture of entrepreneurship thrive?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with mindset.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I talk about it, mostly it's for the employees, right? Have that owner's mindset. Think about the bigger picture, but also the details. Prioritize the company's best interest, not your personal one. But that actually applies at every level. And I think if more people had that shared belief that the company is the number one priority, and that's what we're all trying to do, it will give us the space we need to let people shine. How do you balance the business aspect, I need to be the best at what I do, I need to achieve results, and the people aspect? How do I actually make sure that my people are happy, that they're growing, that I value them, and they're not just doing work for me? It's almost like the difference between outsourcing and collaborating.
Yeah.
And in the heat of the moment, when you're fighting to see another day at your company, it's hard to make that differentiation. So I actually think having a people leader know that and make sure that everyone else knows that, and maybe help put together a few processes of, hey, you know what, once a month, we're going to stop for 30 minutes and we're just going to ask each other, how are you feeling? How are you really feeling? Yeah. Or we're going to run a survey, and it's only going to be 3 questions, and it's going to be anonymous so that you don't feel threatened. And you can tell me, what's really bugging you. And those are all things that we've implemented at Jumpstart. So I'm still learning some of these, but it makes a huge difference.
It does. And that first example that you were sharing, Maya, about every employee at all levels having the mindset that we're here for the business, I was starting to run scenarios like, well, isn't that true of executives? But as soon as I started to gut check against like companies that I work with now or companies that I've worked in, it's not always true, right? Because we're human and we're infallible and we make mistakes and we're selfish and we have ego, right? So we get over time really insular, and our self-awareness lessens, and I think becomes maybe selfish behavior, right? Yeah. An unhealthy selfish behavior, I would say. And you forget that if the director or VP of marketing is up against the VP of HR, you're actually working for the same team. I've seen too many infighting of teams and departments. And that's a great example of, we don't have the best interests of the company in mind when we're operating like that. And again, I've had one situation of a toxic work environment where it was me against another person, and I got sucked right in, right over time. Like at first I fought it and I was like, no, we're going to work this out. But then it did become us versus them. And that unhealthy behavior, we no longer focused on what was good for the company at that point.
How do we bring the executive team together as the first team before we think about our own individual departments? How do we make sure that we're aligned, that we have a great relationship, that we understand each other? And it's making an incredible, it's just so different. When you think about these people as your partners and colleagues and friends, not the people you need to fight over budget, it just shifts everyone's mindset and makes such a better workplace to be at.
Yeah. And you need the right people in those seats, right? Especially with startups, right? It just because you founded the company or co-founded the company doesn't mean you need to be leading the company at that point, right? Because there's just far too many people who stay in those roles, right? I had to wear 15 hats while I was building the company. Maybe you're not wearing the right hat right now, right? Maybe we need you in a strategy role instead of in this role that is supposed to bring this executive team together. 65% of startups fail because of co-founder conflict. Like,
Yep.
that's not okay. And the infighting on executive teams, it trickles down. They don't know that it does, right? Always, but it does trickle down because then the departments are talking and they're not all favoring for the company. So I think that's a great reminder. Maya, let's talk about style, because I think when I have a tendency towards extroversion when I talk to people, and I'm married to an introvert. So I'm always very careful to say, you don't have to be the outspoken extrovert who talks to think like I do, right? That might make sense to you how I've been able to push ideas forward. You can be the quiet, reflective person. So whether you have a tendency for introversion or extroversion, or you're a strategic thinker or high empathy, I feel like everybody could be an impactful entrepreneur if they want to be. What are your thoughts on that overall style and preferences?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I usually define myself as an extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
And here's why. When I think about where I'm most comfortable,
Mm.
it's probably not with a big group of people. That really drains me. It's something that I love doing and I can do it for a little bit, but it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And in really small settings, with my partner, with my family, that's when I feel the most comfortable and relaxed.
Mhm.
But I also have, these big ambitions, and I want to make a difference. My one word, so I went through this process of figuring out like my why, and my one word is impact. And
Mm.
I want to make a difference, and I want to make an impact on the world.
Yeah.
And I realized, there are different ways to do that, and the book was one of them, right? I don't have to be there in front of everyone speaking. But then I started talking and I realized, hey, I actually enjoy this. If I do it like small increments, if I'm just like, doing
Yes.
one event or one workshop or an interview like this one, then I'm great. If I had to do this every day, 5 times a day, I will not survive.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it's all about finding what works for you. There
Yeah.
isn't one way.
Yeah.
And a great example, we have this amazing leadership, our co-founders, and I really think we need to get their voice out there.
Mm.
But they are very different people. My CEO wants to write. He feels more comfortable writing.
Mm.
And our co-founder, who's the CRO, he is this extroverted, fun guy. He does videos. He wants to be in front of the camera.
I've seen it.
And
Yeah,
he loves it. He thrives.
yeah.
So it's really just about finding how you want to share your voice.
Yeah.
And there are so many different ways.
The one commonality that I feel impactful entrepreneurs have is that effort, right? That they're willing to put in that extra effort to maximize their impact. They're not waiting for somebody to say, here's your golden platter of projects and your next career. Like, that's just not going to happen. So you've got to get really curious and open up. I want to see, Maya, if there's been an example where you look back, and whether you call it a failure or a misstep, where maybe you haven't been as impactful internally as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. At one of my career adventures, I found myself in a really weird situation. So I was reporting to a CMO, and that person was let go.
Mm.
And I then had to start working with the CEO. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't really build trust in that relationship. Something just didn't work. Maybe I didn't understand how they tick quickly enough, because they had a very different style than my previous manager. And I tried so hard. I built plans, and I, accepted the extra work and the extra responsibility, and I ran everything through them because they kind of started micromanaging. And I did that for almost 6 months, and it just didn't work. So I don't know if to call it a failure, but sometimes you really need to understand that it may not work, and it's okay. Some people just don't mesh well together. And I had to make a decision about whether or not I want to stay. And I decided to, go to the next place and find a work environment where I can thrive.
Yeah.
But that was my choice, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they were a bad person. They got along with other people. It it just wasn't a good relationship.
Yes. Yeah. I think not everything can be in alignment, right?
Yeah.
I say to people, look, the grass is not greener on the other side. It's just a different color. And there's always dog poop in the yard, meaning no matter what organization you go to,
Yeah.
there's going to be problems. Humans are there. Stuff's going to happen, misunderstandings, miscommunication, people who just don't jive together. It's okay. Right. So, but you have to keep trying. It's kind of where I say like, it's a numbers game. For me, I
Yeah.
think if I had to say probably what was my biggest misstep as an entrepreneur, it was when I lost sight of that the ideas were not about me and that they were about the organization, right?
Yeah.
I,
Oh,
I
I've
would
done that for sure.
frustrated. Be frustrated with like, why can't they see this, right? They can. They can see that. And the closer I got to coaching that C-suite, and I had the honor of coaching quite a few really amazing CEOs over my years, now I see that there's so much to focus on at that stage, guys. They just can't do all of it, and they can't listen to all the ideas. So that's why it's up to us to put a plan together. Here's how it attaches to my leader's goal, which attaches to my department's goal, which attaches to the company goal. Like really get illustrative with it to show the value and try to make it simple at the beginning, right? I had a leader for a while who I think they used the phrase show ready, right? Everything had to be, sort of built to perfection and all the phases had to be done. That doesn't work often, right? We need to sort of pilot and just try and just get something started so that we can see how it works, because not everything we overbuild, right? We don't need Teslas. Sometimes we need like a Pinto or a Toyota.
Yeah.
To
You
get the
need an
job done.
MVP. You need
Yes.
something, a minimum viable product, something you
Yes.
can show that will show results.
Mm.
And that actually ties really well to my philosophy around marketing. It doesn't need to be perfect. I do not want to build an e-commerce website from end to end and then launch and discover something's wrong. I would launch one page, see how people respond to it, and kind of iterate and build from there. So I think sometimes people, yes, you have a great idea. It's a big idea. It probably should be, but what's the minimum you can do right now to prove that you're moving in the right direction and get that signed off on and start executing, because you can't argue with results. And if you show results, it's going to be so much easier to get that budget or the stakeholders that you need to build something even bigger.
Awesome. I love it, Maya. Let's give one last piece of advice for the entrepreneurs or the leaders of entrepreneurs here. What is a behavior, something observable that they could start doing tomorrow, or a habit that they could put into place that's going to maximize their impact?
Yeah, I would recommend that people start becoming opportunity diggers. This is how I call it in the book. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's hard to find opportunities if you don't know what you're looking for. And people talk about luck. I don't believe in luck. Luck is opportunity meets readiness and preparation.
Yes.
So take a time off on your calendar, maybe during the weekend. Start thinking about what you want, what the next role could look like. What is one skill that you don't have and you want to have? You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need to know what you want to do 10 years from now. It's enough for you to know, you know what, I want to be a leader. I've never been a people leader. That's my next thing. Just have that goal and then spend half an hour trying to come up with ideas. Okay, within my existing organization, how can I find opportunities? Well, you can ask for headcount. Maybe that's not the right time. Can you mentor someone else, someone more junior? Maybe not even on your team, maybe someone else's team. Can you maybe launch a project and kind of be the owner, the leader that drives it? That's the type of experience that you still need. And when you have that in mind, then when you go back to the day-to-day, suddenly you'll start seeing opportunities because your mind is wired that way. When you think about something you want, you start seeing it. It's kind of like when my sister-in-law was pregnant. It seemed like everyone around me was suddenly pregnant because I was just so aware. But that's not actually the case. It's just your brain. So think about what you want, you'll find more opportunities.
Yeah. So law of abundance, right? Instead of scarcity. And that goes along with my kid in a candy store. There is so much to be done inside organizations, so much more than we're already doing, no matter how great of a company we work at. So there's always opportunity. So if you want to make a difference, if you want to maximize your impact, if you want more exposure, experience, it's there, right? So I hear you saying be intentional with your own wish list, right? So that you can sort of manifest a lot of those opportunities. If I had to add anything to that, I would say practice that storytelling. As you're talking to other people and you're gathering that data, not everybody feels comfortable talking about their own skills and talents, and this is what I did today. So talk about other people's, talk about the information, talk about the trends you're seeing. Wow, I talked to people in these 5 different departments and everybody's seeing the same thing. I'm feeling it too. Are you? Right? So that's a great way to talk about our storytelling and to be known as somebody who cares about the company's good, right? And wants to come up with solutions. Those are the people that they're going to look to give those additional opportunities, even when you don't ask. So
Yeah.
really great advice, Maya.
And if you can bring all of those people together to create a solution, that's even better because then you're a leader.
Yes, look at you being a connector of ideas and people. That will really stand out internally. So, Maya, I'm so grateful for everything you're doing. You've helped us borrow from the best today in terms of implementing our own career impact and I think reclaiming our time and our talents inside organizations. We don't have to always go outside to be an entrepreneur. We can be super impactful inside, and I need those people. We need those people to help these organizations function really well. So I really appreciate all you're doing for people and culture.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Of course, sending everybody peace and progress.